dealing with criminal investigations that are making the news. Where a lot of us are true crime aficionados, and I consider myself one, both of past crimes and even current incidences that are happening around the country. Now, one thing that I've noticed, and I've been very vocal about, is some of the expertise or lack thereof of the agencies that are conducting these investigations. It seems to me in several accounts that certain basic investigative techniques are not done, and this has caused the delay in the identification and capture of the suspect. So I'm going to highlight these cases as the weeks go by, and if the case is unsolved, I will provide my 2 cents worth as far as additional investigative leads, or outright predicting the suspect and the circumstances. So that's why we're calling it Monday Morning Detective. It's I guess you can call it, you could say it's easy to judge when you're 3,000 miles away from an event or something of that nature. Well, maybe it is. It doesn't stop us from doing it. I think based on previous postings on Facebook and other social media, everybody has an opinion on the skills and ability of these investigations and the investigators conducting them. I'm not above that. I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm far from that. But it seems to me, and it could be my own selective memory, that the predictions that I make on Facebook and other social media regarding the outcome of certain case, it comes true more often than not. Now, yes, certain things are somewhat obvious, perhaps. I don't think in all the cases I've gone too far out on a limb, but I have made some extreme predictions that have come true. And one of them is going to be the case we're going to talk about today. It happened in Memphis back on September 2nd. Today is the 11th, 9/11. Our prayers go up for those families affected by 9/11 and the events that occurred that day. But Eliza Fletcher was a school teacher who went out for her morning run at 4:30 a.m. She was a marathon runner, and training was this a regular thing with her. Now, it turns out that Eliza was also the granddaughter of a billionaire. Now, whether or not that had anything to do with what took place at this time or at that time, we did not know. However, Eliza Fletcher failed to return home. Her husband called the police. Her school called the police. They immediately did some basic investigation, located some video that ID'd the vehicle in which the suspect was in, and apparently the video showed where there was a violent struggle as he got out, caught her on her run, and dragged her into the vehicle. Now, that was the initial report. And from that report, I went on Facebook and said, this is not going to end well. I predict, because I guess I'm just callous that way, but I predicted that she would be found dead, that she would be found sexually assaulted, and that she would be found in an abandoned building. And I wrote it as such. I also added that, in my opinion, the suspect probably didn't know she was the granddaughter of a billionaire. Now, I live 5 hours outside of Memphis. I don't follow the daily news reports there, and I was unaware of this billionaire living in the area, and even less aware that she was the granddaughter. However, police thought it was pertinent because they were investigating a kidnapping, which only makes sense. I likened the event as a carjacking, but she didn't have a car. He basically saw her, took her, and off he disappeared into the darkness. Now, fast forwarding a few days later, they located the suspect, Cleotha Henderson, an ex-con who had been, apparently he's a madman, and has been arrested and convicted of kidnapping in the past. So this man is not, this is his MO, basically. So I felt very strongly that he did not know she was a billionaire's granddaughter, and he had no intent of holding her for ransom. I was correct that she was found dead. I was correct that she was sexually assaulted, and I was correct in the fact that she was found in, or in this case, near an abandoned building. Now, you might say those were not real stretches, or many of you probably thought exactly the same thing, and that's fine. And it's based on not only personal experience in investigating crimes, but also news reports of crimes. This seems to be the pattern. If you're going to snatch a woman in her 20s or 30s, and it's 99% a male that's going to do it, the chances are it's for robbery and sexual assault reasons. So that in itself wasn't a stretch. Number two, killing the suspect. Well, if you've gotten away with snatching her at 4 a.m, not a soul around, and you get away with being unseen as you sexually assault her, there's no point in leaving witnesses. At this point, this person has already a track record of sexual assaults, rapes, and kidnappings, so adding another charge of murder is not going to make a difference in his jail sentence. That's how they're looking at it. And they're also getting rid of the only person that can ID them. I had predicted that she was strangled to death. I don't know what the actual cause of her death is at this point. I don't know if they've released that or any of the autopsy information. Now, the third point was being found near or in an abandoned building. Again, many of you probably thought the same thing. You definitely want to be at a location where you're not seen and not heard. So an abandoned building with tremendous growth around it and trash, etc., that's going to be, more or less a perfect dumping ground. What was disturbing about this investigation on the part of the Memphis police was that the body was found how they described as near the scene of the assault. Now, by near the scene of the assault, I'm going to assume it's within eye view distance. Certainly within a mile, probably within 500 yards, probably within even 100 yards. You're not going to drive very far with a kidnapped suspect who is potentially fighting you the whole way. Someone is bound to see it or hear it, even at 4 in the morning. So, chances are you disable the victim as quickly as possible. Usually a knockout punch or a choke or something of that nature will render them temporarily incapacitated. And then you find that location. I am sure that the suspect, Cleotha Henderson, lived in the area. Turns out he did, and was quite familiar with that abandoned building and the trash area, probably because he's done other crimes there, whether or not it be drugs or other assaults. So this person did not go very far, and it seems to be that the way it's been described, it's almost like he went around the block. Now, she was not found for several days. In fact, the news reports made a big deal of the fact that the police discovered her in a grisly manner, which was through the scent of her decomposing body. And having smelled that more than once in my life, I can tell you it's something you never forget. And once you smell it and you smell it again, you instantly recognize what that smell is. It's like if you know the smell of Clorox or chlorine. Once you smell it, you never forget it, except this is much more disgusting. So, the issue I have, and what the purpose of these podcasts are, is what happened at the initial scene. What did the police do at the initial scene? Now, the initial scene took place on the street. It looks like a T intersection, and a street video captured the event. That's all well and good. That's the starting point. X marks the spot. Everything stems from there, and you work inside out. Okay, inside out. So if they were within, let's say, 250 yards, if her body was found within 250 yards of that initial incident, did they in fact investigate inside out, and who was responsible for that segment of the search? Now, obviously you're going to have homes and businesses and such in between, but there comes a point where they reach this abandoned house or building. Now, if I were the responding sergeant or lieutenant or SWAT commander or whoever, in this case probably homicide lieutenant, who takes over the scene, has number one control of the scene and all the responding officers, my instruction would be to search inside out. There would be other investigators searching for the vehicle. And then I would have a team, probably two teams of two, searching known abandoned buildings and houses in the area. And when we say area, I'm saying a square mile at least to start, depending on how many there are. If it's a nice area like where I live, there aren't many abandoned structures. So those officers, investigators, would be searching those buildings. And they wouldn't have smelled her at that point because it would have been less than 12 hours. But it was also described that her body was not covered, it was just laying there. And any kind of search, even if she were covered with a piece of plywood or paneling or sheet metal or something, any investigator searching these abandoned properties would have come across her. So, in the end, it did not really affect the outcome. I mean, she was dead long before. My guess is that she was dead. She was rendered unconscious. She might have even been killed while during the initial capture. And then he sexually assaulted the dead body. That is done quite often, a lot more often than it's been reported. I guess the suspect feels, he went through the trouble of killing him. Doesn't matter to me if they're dead. They're still warm. And that is beyond disgrace and beyond imagination. But it's common. A lot more common than you probably think. So, but let's say that she was incapacitated temporarily, continued to fight, and did not put up a fight during the assault. I don't recall if there were any injuries or scratches or anything to the suspect. If there were none, chances are she was dead or dying during the assault. She did not strike me, just from pictures and from news reports, as someone who would lay back and take it. She was probably a fighter, knowing that if she could get to her feet, she could outrun this guy. Or at least, basically outrun him. So, anyway, this guy is going to go away for the rest of his life. It would have been nice for the PD and certainly nicer for the family had she been found sooner. But overall, in the end, it doesn't really affect the crime or the punishment. But that's what these podcasts are about. We're just going to talk about the events as reported. I have no other inside information into any of these things. I'm just going to share my thoughts and opinions, and whether or not I would have done anything differently, or people I know in law enforcement might have done anything differently. I think I've worked with some of the best police officers in the world during my time, and personally, I see that we do no wrong. But the further I get away from my time on the streets and investigations, I did have probably 30 years in investigations, private investigations largely. And it's even though, I say that we could probably do no wrong. I do see a lot of wrong done in other areas, under other police departments. Uvalde, Texas, for example, just disgraceful what went on down there. And we may go into that at some point in the future. But this will conclude episode number 1. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any thoughts about this crime, other crimes, I would love to be alerted to, something that interests you, and whether or not you find this podcast at all interesting. This is just an experiment, something I want to do on my own, and we'll leave it at that. So I'd love to hear your feedback. Otherwise, that'll conclude this episode, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Have a great day.